As you may know, the University for Peace was established by the United Nations back in 1980. And now we're collaborating on this program. We've designed and will be delivering the virtual course, Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Social Change, that I think you're really, really going to enjoy. So this session on design thinking is going to give you some, I would say, skills, as well as a mindset of how to approach the journey of being a social entrepreneur. And as I said, I think the skills go way beyond your scope as a social entrepreneur, but I think should be valuable for you in many aspects. So with that, I just want to encourage you to jump in anytime you have questions or comments. You can unmute yourself and just say, hey, Mohit, I have a question, or you can put it in the chat box and then I look at it and I'll answer it maybe a little later. So whatever feels comfortable, but if you're not, probably if you have a question, other people have the same question. And I feel that learning happens best in that kind of interactive space. All right, so thank you for being here. I'm excited to be here. It's I'm based in Florida. I travel a lot to Costa Rica where the UPeace is, but of course, a lot of my work now is virtual. So it's about 8:30 a.m. my time. So I'm 12 hours behind all of you, about 12 hours. Some of you are 11 hours ahead. So ready, let's launch in. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. And just tell me the first time I'm doing this. Are you seeing my PowerPoint okay? Give me a thumbs up. Are you perfect? Okay. So thank you all for turning on webcams. Wonderful to see you. Let's make sure to take a group picture at the end of this so we capture this. So I wanted to start with some introductions, and then we'll talk about why is design thinking useful in the context we live in, and a little bit about our approach to this session. And let's look at an example of design thinking in action after that. And then we'll debrief on the process and mindsets of design thinking. And then we'll go into some practice, okay, towards the end. So, but all of this to say, this is the plan, but I'm happy to also go off plan based on the questions you have, because part of the philosophy of design thinking is, who am I designing for? Who's the session for? Is it for me? Is it for you? Right? You're the participants, you're the clients, you're the beneficiaries. So very, very important for me to make sure that all your questions are answered. And even though this plan has worked well, given your context, happy to spend more time on any aspect that makes sense. So let's jump in. I wanted to start by sharing a story that really changed my life. And it's the story of when my childhood best friend, here in the picture, his name is Julian, when he visited me in San Francisco, because I had met Julian in elementary school. I was in Switzerland for 4 years, 8 years old to 12 years old, and we were best friends. And then my family had moved and then moved again. And so I didn't live in Switzerland again. And now I was 25 years old. I hadn't seen Julian for about 12 years. I was living in San Francisco, and Julian got in touch again. He said, it's been too long, I'm going to come visit you. So he arrived. And at that time, you know, he arrived, I was going to take a week off or 2 weeks off to travel, but he arrived a couple of days before, and he saw me go to work and come back and go to work and come back. So finally, when our holidays started, he said, Mohit, I've seen you every day. You put on this dark gray suit and you go off to work for about 12 hours and you come back. What is it that you do? And I said, you know, Julian, I'm a management consultant. Now, in my little world, everybody knew what a management consultant was, but he was like, I don't know what that is. And that really surprised me. So I tried to start explaining to him, you know, what I do. And because he looked confused. So I said, you know, as a management consultant, I work across multiple industries and cross-functional areas. And I was using these big words because that's what, that was my best attempt at explaining to him what management consulting was. And I could tell it was really confusing to him. And more importantly, I wasn't able to communicate to him why I was doing what I was doing. And at that point, I felt uncomfortable. So I turned it over to Julian. I said, Julian, I haven't seen you also for 12 years. What do you do now? And he said, Mohit, for me, it was very easy. As you know, I love kids. I love sports. And I think when kids do sports, it's good for them. So I became a sports teacher in the Swiss public school system. So it took Julian less than 30 seconds to explain to me not only what he did, why he did it, and how it made a positive impact on people. And I realized after this conversation that I hadn't found that for myself. I hadn't found something that I really believed in that made a difference in the world. I had accepted that job as a management consultant because it was prestigious, because it paid well, but it didn't play to really what I loved, and it didn't make a real impact in the world according to my belief system. So that conversation prompted a lot of soul searching. And really, I asked myself this question. This conversation happened literally 25 years ago. So I was 25 at the time, and the question it made me have is, how do I do work that I love, make a positive impact, and pay the bills, just like my best friend Julian? And so I must say that the reason I start with this story is, and I'll stop sharing sometimes, just so that we can see each other. Stories are an important part of design thinking. We learn about people through storytelling. When you do design thinking, you'll see the first step of design thinking is to empathize with who you're trying to solve a problem for, or who you're trying to serve. And empathy is trying to really see things from other people's perspectives. When we get people's stories, we start understanding their world better. And then as designers, we might change our approach, right? Because now we understand the people we're trying to serve. So I want to encourage all of you to think about the power of stories, and also the ability just to ask each other, what's your story? What brought you to this program? Because when you practice asking people for their stories with friends, it becomes easier when now you're maybe meeting strangers or customers saying, hey, I'd really like to learn more about you. It's developing curiosity and being able to collect data, not just in numbers, but also in stories, because then you start really understanding the world that you're living in and where you're trying to make a difference. So I wanted to share a story about me, my values. That's part of what really, after I left management consulting, I moved into education. And let me show you a slide that kind of gives you a sense of some of the things that are important to me now. So my life on one slide. So A.T. Kearney was the company I was working at when I met Julian. And so I left that company and I ended up going to teach for a couple of years, decided that I want to stay in education, went to graduate school at Harvard, and I'd done my undergraduate at Stanford in industrial engineering. But part of the reason I studied industrial engineering was not because I chose that really. Being Indian, many of you will recognize the same pressure coming from different Asian countries. But my parents wanted me to be an engineer. My dad thought that would be a good degree for me. And so I did it, but it wasn't my passion. And so when I worked in management consulting, that was also acceptable to my parents. Okay, he's going to be a well-paid business consultant. That was not my passion. So my passion was in education, and I was able to follow it. And so a couple of things I want to share with you here is I took a strengths survey. It's called the VIA Strength Survey. I encourage all of you to take it. I'll share the link with you at some point soon. But my top 3 strengths were love of learning, curiosity and interest in the world, and social intelligence. And the reason I talk about strengths is designers, when you design for others, it's really good to know your strengths and to try and create teams with complementary strengths. And then the other thing I want to share with you is this idea of 6 words that capture my mission or my purpose. Learn and teach what I love. So right now I'm teaching, facilitating on design thinking, but I'm also learning about it, right? It's such a dynamic topic, and it's a topic I love. So that helps me decide, should I say yes to this opportunity or no to this opportunity? Does it fit, generally speaking, my values of learning and teaching what I love? So I want to turn it over to you now. I've shared a little bit about my story, and I want to ask you what your 6-word sentence is. Now you might think, oh no, you're asking me, Mohit, in 1 minute to come up with my 6-word sentence. That's exactly what I'm asking you to do. It's a prototype. It's your it's like your quick response under some amount of pressure. You could think about it for 3 hours and maybe not come up with anything better, but don't think it's final. You can think about it more and change it. But designers are inherently creative, right? So right now, I could give you a lot of time for this, but creativity likes constraints. So when I give you the time constraint, I'm going to force you to come up with 6 words in the next minute that you're going to share on the chat box that captures who you are. Don't think of it as being perfect. It can change over time, but that's the challenge that I have for you. So I'm going to type it into the chat box here. I'll use caps, your 6-word sentence. It doesn't have to be grammatically correct, but I'm going to make sure that everyone has a chance to respond. And your minute starts now. I'm timing this. You can go faster than a minute if you want. Ready, timer on. All right, Nee, thanks for getting us started. I'm helping Vietnamese people speak English. Love it. Plan to fail, fail to plan. Pascal, that's a good one. Passion is not the only door. I actually really agree with that, and we'll see why with design thinking. You and I only live once. So true. Give more than you get. Wonderful. Doing what I love to do. Simple, powerful. Do what makes me happy. Yeah. Passionate and challenge the possible opportunities. Thank you. Yeah. I'm a brave woman on a mission. Could be the title of a book, a movie. Love it. Let's go on an adventure. Nice. Opportunities and grit make me dream. My God, you guys have thought about this before. Who told you I was going to be asking? These are amazing 6-word sentences. Having passion and motivation never gets you bored. We're not limited to identity. Absolutely. These are wonderful. Now let's consider this. We've gone a little over a minute, so you should all have them in now. It's 1:30. Have a little faith and fly. You know, this is exactly this was your first design challenge. So I just want to applaud everyone. Let's just give everyone a round of applause here, because this is not easy. And the fact that you shared this with a whole group means that you made yourself vulnerable, right? You took on a challenge, a big challenge, like tell me your life in 6 words, your mission statement, and then you, as a designer, you put your ideas out there. That means it's not perfect yet, but you're willing to expose yourself, and that leads to collaboration. That leads to people knowing each other more. So I see a couple more coming in. Living the best life I love. Lovely, Paula. I know the reason behind your goals. Nee, you've experienced something similar before. So wonderful. So, you know, design thinking, this kind of creativity under some amount of time pressure has been the story of my life. I didn't know that there was a process around it. So when I first discovered design thinking, I think I was back at a reunion for Stanford University. I think it was my 15th year reunion, and the design school had just started there. And I thought, oh, wow, this is fascinating. there's a structure to being creative and solving problems creatively. So yeah, I was exposed to it fairly recently, but I had been doing it for a longer time. And so part of the story of the Center for Executive Education also, it was a design thinking process. Now we have maybe 400-500 participants going through the center's programs every year. But when I first put together a very short proposal to start the Center for Executive Education, it was an experiment. It was a prototype. I had only thought about the next step and hadn't really got the perfect plan together. So part of designers, what we have to do is we have to be willing to put out our ideas into the world without necessarily anything more than just a prototype, right? Without the perfect kind of service or product already built out. So thank you for all sharing. And let's go into now the next part of the agenda, which is, why is design thinking useful? So firstly, let me go off sharing slides for a little bit. How many of you have been exposed to design thinking before? Like how many of you have had a course, a workshop on design thinking? Anyone? So put up your hand. Okay. So anyone? Okay, so for most of you, it's very new. So let me give you a little bit of context. So Celia and Nee, you've had some design thinking. So Nee, can you come off mute and just tell us a little bit about your background in design thinking?
Okay, so I used to take a course in UX design, and in that course, I happened to learn about design thinking, and it was my very first encounter with the subject. And then during this YSEALI program, we actually did join a design thinking session uh, by our academic director. So
I see. Oh,
yeah.
great. Okay, perfect. So you've had some exposure to design thinking. Excellent. So all of you. And then maybe, yeah, anyone else? Sunny?
Yes, so thank you, Mohit. So basically, it's the same like me as for previous sessions with Miss Katie. For our session during YSEALI academic, we have been exposed with it. So to simply about the design thinking is more about the process for creative problem solving that emphasize on 5 indicators. So yeah,
Great,
that's it.
great.
Thank you.
And who ran that session? Did Katie run it?
Yeah, Katie.
Okay, okay. How long ago was that?
About a month ago.
About what?
A month ago.
Okay, perfect. So this is great timing for a refresher now that you're going to be starting the Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Social Change course. Excellent. So let me do this. Let me go into the context that we're living in that makes design thinking particularly powerful. Sela, sorry, did you want to add something? Sela, you've been exposed to it too, right? You have your hand up, Sela.
Yeah, so no, I think my experience was coming from a leadership scholarship provided by a multinational corporates in my country, in Indonesia. So I was trained like for 2 years to learn about the critical and design thinking. So we have like 5 design thinking tools that we learn for 2 years. So yeah, that's where I actually work on the design thinking, and it was very insightful and very helpful for my careers as well.
That's fantastic. So all of you now, you know that you have within your group a design thinking expert, right? When you want to go back for help and advice. So thank you, Sela, for sharing that. So let's get into a little bit about the context we're living in. You know, we're living in what people would call a VUCA world, and VUCA stands for our world is volatile. That's the V. It's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. When you think about the rate at which information flows and how it's so hard to do any kind of long-term planning nowadays, our world, you could argue, was more stable, more certain, less complex or simpler, and much less ambiguous, so clearer a generation ago, even I would say prior to the internet. You know, the internet, which I don't think we can imagine the world without internet, but that was only 30 years old, right? It was fall of Berlin Wall, 1989, internet entered the public domain in 1990 or so, right? So the recent history. So yeah, our world has just become very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The combination of the way information flows, the changing political landscape, and of course, COVID just adds to that. And so the context is, we just need a new approach to thinking about solving problems. This is a quote I thought I could share with you from Thomas Friedman. He's the author of The World is Flat. And he is also the foreign correspondent for the New York Times. So author, thinker, he says what every employer is looking for is not someone who can do the job, but someone who can reinvent the job. The reason he's saying this is because by the time, if you get hired in any job, the world's changed since the job description was written. So chances are you won't be doing the job you were hired to do, but you'll have to reinvent the job because the world's different, right? So it just speaks to the pace of change that we're living in now. And so what design thinking does, design thinking, it's all about creative problem solving. It's all about having an innovative mindset. And David Kelly, who said this, he's the founder of the Stanford School of Design and also this company IDEO, that's famous for using design thinking, right? You may have heard of it from the shopping cart example, or Katie may have brought this up, but he says enabling people to gain innovation confidence today is as important as gaining literacy skills. So, wow, you know, it's quite a provocative statement, but he's saying that with so much change happening, unless you're confident in innovating, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic is not going to take you that far. So that's why design thinking is particularly useful. And so our approach is, you know, if I just lectured to you about design thinking, you wouldn't retain, you'd only retain about 5%. So we're going to do some practice, we're going to have discussions, I'll show you some videos, and I think that'll give you the ability to really feel that you have learned design thinking, which is a powerful new process and mindset that you can use in your personal and professional lives. And then I want to make sure that we've seen an example and analyzed it, so that my goal is you emerge with this renewed confidence in your innovation skills, and you're ready to apply the design thinking process and mindset to your projects, right? For the innovation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and social change course to start with. So let's get to design thinking in action. And before I give you an example, let me ask you this question. When you hear the word innovation, what are a few words that come to mind? So here, let's do this as a rapid chat. So when you hear innovation, what comes to mind? So chat in your responses. Yeah, sustainability, creativity, renew. Nice. Discovery. Apple as an embodiment of innovation. Nice. Okay, so we all have certain things. Expensive, that's an interesting one. We'll look at that. Yeah. So all of these are associations you have with innovation, right? Hope is, I love that idea too. So let's look at yeah, you know, unique. We'll see. One, I'll just comment. If there is something that you see that's working in one context and you bring it to another context. So let's say if you see a very interesting schooling model working in Indonesia, but you don't have it in Malaysia, and you put it together in Malaysia, I would say that makes it unique also. Sometimes it is copying and then making it work for a new context. All right, so this is one kind of visual understanding of what innovation is. And it comes to us from IDEO, the company that really is using design thinking in all kinds of projects around the world. So it's really when these three things come together. So firstly, what is feasibility? Feasibility is the fact that you can actually do it, right? You can make it happen, you can build it. So for example, my brother moved to London in the year 2000 from the US, and he kept hearing these songs that he really liked the music because he had moved to London from another country, but he didn't know what the music was, right? He'd ask people, hey, what is this song? What is this song? Nobody knew. So he and three friends came up with the idea, because everybody in London in the year 2000 was now having mobile phones, not our smartphones, mobile phones, but they came up with an algorithm to fingerprint music. And so he is one of the co-founders of Shazam. But he had the idea, but the feasibility to develop an algorithm to recognize music, it took them actually millions of dollars, and they had to raise money to do it and things. So sometimes the feasibility makes something very, very difficult. But the reason I share the Shazam story with you is even ideas that seem kind of crazy at the beginning, with enough grit, with enough determination, can be done. Same with, now Elon Musk is popularizing tourism to space. What a crazy idea to go to space as a tourist. Well, he's making it possible. So feasibility is, are we able to create the solution to the problem that we have, whether it's identifying music or taking tourists to space, not astronauts, tourists. However, sometimes what happens is the business cost, the viability of doing that makes it very accessible to a very, very small market. So if you want to go to space, Teddy or Stella or any one of you, you're going to have to be very, very rich, right? It's millions of dollars still. It's not like taking a flight, which, 50 years ago, flying from Asia to the US was very, very expensive. Now it feels like, upper middle class people can easily do that once or twice every couple of years, right? So the business cost allows an innovation to reach a larger audience or not, depending on how much it costs. And then desirability. Are people actually going to use it? Do people want it, right? Imagine you could go to space for $500. Would you want to, right? Arguably, yes. But there are lots of things that people invent or do that there's no desirability. Even the features, if you look at your iPhone or your smartphone, it often has features that the engineers have developed that nobody actually hardly ever uses. So the short of it is, when these three things come together, when people want something that can be built at a price point that's accessible, that leads to the innovation actually seeing the light of day. So I'm going to ask you a quick question here. Of these three things, when we innovate, which one do we sometimes completely ignore? So type in the word either viability, desirability, or feasibility. What's your best guess? Which one often do we overlook? Good guesses, good guesses. I'll give it 30 more seconds. So far, desirability seems to be a winner. Feasibility is coming on second. Viability also is a close third. This is like a race. All right. So yeah, for all of you who said desirability, often in our eagerness to create a solution, to bring it at a price point that works, we forget that, hey, we're creating a solution not for ourselves, but for other people. Have we checked in? Do they like it? Will they use it? So we underemphasize desirability. And that's why a lot of inventions, a lot of innovation never get used to the extent that they're supposed to get used. So what design thinking does, it's really crafted to minimize that I would say that point, that we have to make sure that desirability is central to our process. So before I show you the steps of design thinking, let me see some messages. So Jennifer, you say, but we can create demand and design like Apple. Great point. So, you know, let me come off share for a second here. So, you know, any theory, any kind of, especially a theory about human beings and psychology, I think it's good for us to consider the counter example. So Jennifer, I love your comment. Yeah, sometimes people don't know what they want, right? I think Henry Ford said, if you ask people what they want, they'll say, we want a faster horse. And he invented the car, right? Because you can't conceive of a car if you've never seen a car. You can just think about, I want my horse to go faster. And Jennifer, to your point, if you've never had a smartphone, you don't know that technology exists, you can't say I'd want a smartphone, right? So sometimes you do have to push things out and see you know, how the market reacts. But I would say Apple has Apple uses design thinking all the time. They have these people that are kind of early adopters. They test like crazy all their products. So yes, to the mass market, it might look like, oh, they've just created something and pushed it, but really there was a lot of user testing going on. But I love your point, Jennifer. And then I can remember Katie said most startups are solving the wrong problems. Absolutely. Yeah. And why does that happen? Not enough empathy with the user. Maybe the engineers get caught up in something they are excited about, or they assume that their problem is shared by the world. So that's a really good point that Katie made. So awesome. Thank you for sharing kind of a counterpoint to design thinking. Sometimes you just have to try to put something out and see if people use it or not, right? By the way, if you think about Apple's products, just think about it. It's I forget its revenues now, but it's got billions of dollars of revenue, and all the Apple products that exist today can be put on a table. Billions of dollars of revenue, all the Apple products in existence can fit on a table, a dining table, right? So for everything that Apple launches, there's like 20 different things it doesn't launch. Right. So it's hyper focused on the few things it puts to market. And again, there's a lot of intention around that. There is a lot of understanding of the consumer. And sometimes you just have to create something that many consumers are going to see for the first time in your product. You can't ask them, are you going to like an iPhone if they've never seen an iPhone before? Yeah. So the steps of design thinking. So Katie must have gone through this. But you start with empathy. Empathy for who? For whoever you're trying to solve the problem for, right? And then once you've done the empathy, that's a good time to define what is the issue. Because you might think, oh, people in this village need more books so that, you know, they can read more. But when you talk to them, they are interested in reading, but they don't want to read books. They want to read on a Kindle. You know, you might be surprised, or whatever the answer is. They want to read on their phone. Everybody actually has a smartphone in this village. So it changes your definition of what the problem is. You're suddenly not trying to get books. You're trying to get things they can read on a phone. And then ideation is this idea that you create. You don't lock in on one solution first. You brainstorm a lot of possible ideas. Because when you lock in on one solution, then you're narrowing your thinking, right? So ideation is like brainstorming. Brainstorming what? Possible solutions to the problem that you've defined. Prototype is this idea of you build out one or two of these ideas in a fast, cheap way. Your prototype is meant to fail, but the prototype is going to give you more information about the eventual solution. And then you test your prototype to get some feedback. So these are basically the 5 steps. They don't always play out linearly, but I do want to now share a short video with you that those 5 steps in action. Notice in this short video, it's about helping elderly people be more mobile, right? That was how the problem was originally framed. So just notice those different steps of design thinking. If for some reason you can't hear the video as I play it, please let me know. Just put up your hand or something. Okay, ready? I'm going to start it now. It's about 4 minutes long.
Design thinking is a 5-step process to come up with meaningful ideas that solve real problems for a particular group of people. The process is taught in top design and business schools around the world. It has brought many businesses lots of happy customers and helped entrepreneurs from all around the world to solve problems with innovative new solutions. Step 1. Empathize. The purpose of step 1 is to conduct interviews that give you an idea about what people really care about. We need to empathize with their situation. For example, if you want to help old people, you might find that they want to keep the ability to walk around. In your conversations, they might share with you different ways they can do that. Later into the interview, you'll want to dig a little deeper, look for personal stories or situations where things became difficult. Ideally, you redo the process with many people with the same problem. Step 2. Define the problem. Looking at the interviews, you can now understand the actual needs that people are trying to fulfill with certain activities. One way to do that is to underline the verbs or activities that the people mentioned when talking about their problems, like going for a walk, meeting old friends for tea, or simply going grocery shopping around the corner store. You might realize it's not so much about going out, but more about staying in touch. After your analysis, formulate a problem statement. Some elderly are afraid to be lonely. They want to stay connected. Step 3. Ideate. Now focus only on the problem statement and come up with ideas that solve the problem. The point is not to get a perfect idea, but rather to come up with many ideas, like unique virtual reality experiences, senior-friendly hoverboards, or a modified pushcart. Whatever it is, sketch up your best ideas and show them to the people you are trying to help, so you can get their feedback. Step 4. Prototype. Now take a moment to reflect on what you have learned from your conversations about the different ideas. Ask yourself, how does your idea fit in the context of people's actual lives? Your solution could be a combination of a new idea and what is already being used. Then connect the dots, sketch up your final solution, and go build a real prototype that's just good enough to be tested. Step 5. Test. Now test your prototype with actual users. Don't defend your idea in case people don't like it. The point is to learn what works and what didn't, so any feedback is great. Then go back to ideation or prototyping and apply your learning. Repeat the process until you have a prototype that works and solves the real problem. Now you are ready to change the world or open shop. To experience design thinking firsthand, do the free virtual design thinking crash course from Stanford's D School right now.
All right, so I will share with you a couple of links, maybe to places you can go for more, but this came from the Stanford Design School because they see how powerful this process can be to solve all kinds of complex challenges. So they offer these learning materials. But what I want to offer you first is I'm going to put you in small groups. And the question that you have is, what stood out for you in this short video? So I've just put the question in the chat box, but I'm going to give you time to focus on, what stood out for you in the video, but the video actually talked about the steps of design thinking. So by extension, also feel free to talk to your group members of what's standing out for you now about design thinking, right? You've had a session with Katie, you're hearing it from me from a different context. Like, what's it making you think? Like, are you doing this? What's an aha moment you're having? Is something standing out for you? So talk about the video, but more largely about the process. Any questions before I put you into your breakout rooms on what are you going to be doing. You got it? Okay. So I'm going to try and put you in rooms of 3 or 4, and it's about 2 minutes per person. Make sure everybody gets a chance to share. So I'll bring you back in, let's call it 6 minutes. Sound good? Okay. The one request I have is, design thinking. It's a high energy. So enjoy your discussions, but keep it focused on the topic, which is, what are you thinking about design thinking? What do you think about the video? Not like, hey, there's sometimes we get sidetracked because we're high energy people and things. So stay on topic, enjoy your conversations. I'll see you back in a few minutes, 6 minutes. So you got to join the breakout room now. I think I opened it. Yeah. Are you seeing it? Open all rooms. Yep.
Oh, we're back.
That's right. Welcome back. Welcome back. How was the time? Did it feel everyone had a chance to share a little bit?
Yeah, but taco late, and we just need to leave the breakout session, and just
Yeah.
he doesn't have a chance to share, but that's okay.
Got it. Yeah. A couple of people had that. So let me ask, just having had this check-in, talking about the video, talking about design thinking, are there any comments, questions at this point that came up that you'd like to bring up for the group? So just looking around, any kind of comments, questions, aha moments?
I think I can share.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, go for it, and then Micah next.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, my turn, or
Yes.
Stella first? I don't know. Okay.
Andra, go for it.
So all right. So design thinking. Well, actually, that I noticed from the video, it's 2 indicators that matter, especially when we heard like the word test and the prototypes. That is exactly what we need on design thinking. Especially now, if I can divide socially, in terms of the business, it's pretty easy in Indonesia. Now we open a business, but it's pretty hard for us like to maintain a long-term business. That is exactly where the design thinking needs. Why? Because our job is not just like, hey, you need to open that business. How can we make it like a long last? So the design thinking needs a good brainstorming and a good prototype as well. And as well as like, we need to test that in terms of the R&D, for example. But if I take it into the research things, because I'm an educator, so I know quite like familiar with the word R&D research. It's quite similar for me in the design thinking. Like we propose a certain prototype, and we need to validate that. We need to taste that in society, how it fits to the markets as well. So it's very important indeed. It happens because we got the urgency in the society, and to convince people, we need to ensure it's the quality things that we actually provide. That's actually, the conclusions, I guess, towards that we share in the breakout sessions. I think, thank you, Mohit, that's for me.
Thank you, Andra. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And Andra, like to your point, that there might be things you are already doing, whether you're calling them R&D or whatever other processes you might have, that you're like, I'm already doing steps 3, 4, and 5, but maybe I need to do more empathy, or maybe I need to do more brainstorming before we launch. So please, of course, feel free to look at your own process already and see, are there any gaps? What would a design consultant advise me? So maybe Need that responds to your question in the chat box. You say, what do you think, Mohit, is the most important phase of design thinking? And I really think it depends. Because some of you might be doing the empathy really well and defining the problem really well, but you don't give yourself enough room to do the ideation, right? Or so for me personally, a lot of when I look at design thinking, I think, oh, I often skip the empathy because I design courses, right? I get excited about ideas. Like right now, I'm excited about how do we manage a virtual team, right? Or a hybrid team. And I know there's a demand for that, but sometimes I skip the empathy piece because I'm like, oh, there's a demand for that. Let me design something. So for me, the empathy piece feels counter, like I skip it often and I need to remind myself to do it. But for you, it might be something else. So it really depends on who's approaching design thinking and what their process already is. And then Sani, you say, trust the process and couldn't skip even one phase as we need to innovate something that will solve the issue and suit the market. So great. Yeah, thank you. So is it fine to skip one phase? You know, I would say yes, in the sense that there might be a phase that you, for example, you know, we talked about Henry Ford saying, hey, if I had to empathize with people and ask them, do they, you know, what do they want? They'd say faster horses. So sometimes you skip the empathy phase because you realize the question you would ask would be very hard for them to conceive of. Where, you know, sometimes you like if you're in the medical industry, right? It's not easy to rapidly prototype and test a new drug. There are all kinds of procedures around it. So your prototyping cycle might look different. It might be internal prototyping versus user testing. So there's certainly steps of the design thinking based on your context that you either say, I'm already doing this, or the government wouldn't allow this, or I'm a one-person team. I have only this much time. I'm going to prioritize this step over that step. So it is not prescriptive in those 5 steps. It's more around an approach to innovating. I hope that helps, Nii. And so, and Micah, you were going to say something also, so I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, well, it's actually pretty similar to Andres, but I guess the key takeaway from our group is that design thinking is very user-centric, and that's something that we always forget about. So like, if you look at the 3 steps, like in the whole step process, you have empathy, prototype, and test. Those are all user-centric. And I guess when we have ideas, we really just innovate, ideate, and think of projects from within ourselves and forget that we need market validation for those things or for our projects to fly. And it's really that the fact that it's a very user-centric process and that we should just keep on, I guess, reaching out to our target market.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point to emphasize because, you know, if I rewind when I was a kid and I just remember some of the 5-year plans that my dad used to put together for his company. In those days, a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan made sense because things were not changing at today's pace. So today, you know, Micah, to your point, if I made a 3-year plan for a client and I didn't check back with them many, many times, the world will have changed in 3 years. I mean, I can pretty much bet that whatever I design today is not going to fit their needs 3 years from now. So yeah, I think we need a much closer iterative process with the client or the beneficiary, right? Great point. Sela, you say, when you mention that each step depends on the individual, does it mean that design thinking fits more than to collective work rather than a one-person team? Let me just make sure I understand the question. When you mention that each step depends on the individual, does it mean that design thinking fits more than to collective work? Rather,
Do you want me to clarify?
Yeah, go for it.
No, when you're talking about that, each step depends on the individual. So that means that other steps are not really accommodated, right? Because maybe one person could be like concerned in one step only, for example, the empathy. So does it mean that we really need to work on other people for this design thinking tools to really accommodate all the steps to be very well successful implemented? Or is it also okay if we can have like one person, for example, me, to, you know, design everything for all the steps?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is, let me contrast 2 situations. So imagine you're the sole entrepreneur or the person who's trying to solve an issue. and you look at the design thinking steps, and you might think to yourself, I've already done step one because I have all this information, because I was a school teacher and I'm trying to solve a problem for school teachers, so I don't need to do. So sometimes what I'm saying is that if you look at the steps, you might find that you decide not to follow them sequentially because you have limited time. And even though you recognize that each step is important, you might have much more information in one of the steps, or you might realize that given your context, you can't easily get to one of the steps. So for different reasons, you might do a different process, but informed by the design thinking approach. So, but if you're a team, as a team, you might also have the same realization that, hey, we're trying to invent a new, I don't know, vaccine for COVID, but we can't test it as rapidly as we'd want because there are all these regulations. So you might have the same constraints as a team. But one point that I want to say is that if as an individual you feel, oh, I'm not good at empathy, I don't like talking to people, then definitely that shouldn't be a constraint. Then you need to find somebody with complementary skills who are like, oh, I love talking to people. I love getting people's stories. So in that sense, I would say it's better to have a team. It's better to play to your strengths and not let your own limitations, because you don't have that skill, stop you from following the process. I hope that was somewhat helpful. Let's look at Jennifer. You say we can skip, but can we switch steps? I mean, we can define the problem first and then empathize with our target. Is any successful? Is there a situation like that? You know, so in a way, Jennifer, it's almost like when you go in to talk to people to do the empathy, you do have a hypothesis of what the problem is, right? So if let's go back to a school teacher situation, if you start interviewing school teachers in, let's say, Indonesia, public school, your hypothesis might be they're not getting paid enough. Right. That's why they're not as motivated. That's why they're not doing as good a job as they should. So you have a hypothesis, right? And then you talk to them and it might validate that hypothesis. So then you can define the problem as, if we were able to give teachers 10% more, they would be more motivated. But you might also learn in that process that it's not just about money. It's about appreciation. It's about resources. So yes, technically, when you say, I mean, can we define the problem first and then empathize with our? Yes, because in your head, you've defined the problem, but you're willing to expand and change based on empathy. So a lot of these steps, you go back and forth. And so it's not like literally climbing steps in a staircase, because when you climb steps, you tend to not go back, right? That's like reversing. In design thinking, it's like, okay, you can do more empathy, you define the problem, but then you realize I need to go back because now COVID's happened. The empathy I did maybe. So often you go back and forth. And so it's not a linear process, to your point. I hope that's helpful for everybody. Definitely. If you're a sole entrepreneur, right, and you need to ideate, yeah, pull in your volunteers, your friends, people who know your project. Like brainstorming in isolation, you don't have quite the energy, the radical collaboration that design thinking calls for. Great discussion. Thank you, everyone. So let's do this. I want to give you a little chance to practice some design thinking. So let me share screen again, and I'll go through something fairly quickly because I think we know this. So the process of design thinking that we just looked at, I think this is pretty clear, right? These 5 steps. And again, don't think of them as linear. We've established that. The other thing that really is
an important part of design thinking, is the mindset of design thinking. So we've talked about focusing on people, right? That has come up. Thank you for bringing that up. Having optimism, you know, if you're working as a social entrepreneur on issues that range from climate change to poverty to discrimination, these are big, bad problems, right? They have, I mean, climate change, it's been caused over centuries of overconsumption. It's inherent in capitalism, right? So you have to be optimistic that we can do something positive. Otherwise, it's almost like, why bother, right? So having optimism that the process can help you move things forward. Bias towards action, you try things, get feedback, try things, get feedback, talk to people, get out of your office, right? Get out from in front of your computer. Though now in front of the computer, you can do a lot, including interact, but don't just do the analysis paralysis. Try things, get feedback. Learn from failure. You've brought that up already. It's inherent in the prototyping process. And then, you know, to the points you brought up, collaboration across sectors. So my brother with the Shazam application, he's not an engineer. He's a business guy, right? He loves music. They collaborated with an engineer. They brought him onto the team. They hired an engineer who had a PhD in acoustics. They collaborated with two other people who were music lovers, who were business people. So if you get 4 engineers in a room trying to develop an algorithm like you know, fingerprinting music, often they won't think about the user experience. They'll only think about the engineering problem. So just try to get people with different backgrounds, and it leads to much richer, from brainstorming to an understanding of the issues. And then, of course, embracing ambiguity. The idea is we don't have all the data we need. So at some point, it's like your 6-word sentence. It's like, Mohit, I need more time. I need to talk to my mother first. No. It's, you don't have all the data. You don't have all the time. What's your best guess at this point? Nice. I'll let my brother know. He's not actively involved anymore. Apple bought it a few years ago, but good to hear. So let's look at, I'm gonna skip actually well, you know, talking about optimism, talking about solution focused. Sometimes we approach a problem thinking about, why do I still have the problem? Whether it's me personally, like, you know, you could have a problem you're trying to solve for yourself, or a problem for society. What design thinking is a big fan of is trying to focus on the solution, right? Is visualizing, asking a slightly different question that's solution-based. So for example, here, you know, these are 3 reframes of that question. Okay. Can you see how if you ask a different question, you're able to start moving from what's the problem to what's the solution? And so let me illustrate this with a couple of examples. You know, Airbnb, I don't know, are you familiar with Airbnb, most of you? Right? Okay, instead of staying in hotels, you can stay in Airbnbs. And the reframe there is, people are not looking for a hotel when they travel. What are people looking for? They're looking to be comfortable. They're looking, of course, for a bed to sleep in, but they're looking to not feel like a traveler, like a stranger. That's the problem that Airbnb solves. So by reframing the question, how can we have a better, they didn't say, how can we have a better hotel experience? How can we travel with the comfort of being in one's own home, right? That question led to Airbnb. With Uber, it's not like, you know, how do we build a better taxi service, right? People don't want a taxi. People just want to be able to get to their destination without having the hassle of always having their own car or taking a taxi and flagging it down. So they reframed the question. So just the power of reframing is something designers do. So I do want to give you a little chance to practice in small groups. And this is what we're going to do. So we're going to try it. And the first thing is I'm going to give everyone a chance to think about a real challenge that you're facing. Here's the question. Reflect on a challenge or a decision that you're currently facing. Try to pick something significant where you're feeling stuck or some level of anxiety. So this challenge can be at a personal level, right? It could be the decision whether I should do this or this, or it could be at your organizational level. Many of you are already running small social enterprises, or so it might be around your organization or at a personal level. So does everyone have a challenge in mind? Let me give you 30 seconds on this. Think about a challenge that's real for you. And by the way, it can't be a gravity challenge. I call a gravity challenge things that you can't do anything about. Like if you don't like gravity, that's too bad. If you don't like hierarchy in government, that's too bad. If you don't like corruption in politics, it has to be something that you can act on to make a difference, okay? Corruption in politics is a bad example because you could bring it down a few levels, but it's basically something that you can act on, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to put you in groups and we're going to go through some of the steps of design thinking, starting with empathy and problem definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in groups, slightly bigger groups, maybe groups of 4. And quickly, one person decides, just designate one person to share the challenge for your group. So one person gets to be the presenter. The other people are the design thinking consultants for that person. Is that clear? So one person in every group gets to share their challenge. You get 2 minutes to share your challenge. And then what happens after you share the challenge? The group gets to ask clarifying questions and dig deeper, right? That's the empathy. Who's the client here? Andra, if you share the problem, it's your problem, right? You are the client. So they're going to give you empathy by asking questions and understanding better, right? So we're doing design thinking on ourselves. So, and I'll bring you back after that. We'll see how it's going and we might have time for the next step. Okay, so 2 things you're going to do in the next 4 minutes. Designate somebody who volunteers in your group to share the challenge. And I'll tell you when 2 minutes up. And then the next 2 minutes, clarify, give him or her empathy to understand more about the challenge that he or she has described. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Check in. Is everyone clear what you're going to do in the next 4 minutes? Okay, so I'm going to recreate the groups. I'm going to have 8 rooms, so 4 participants per room. Immediately, somebody volunteer, share your challenge in the first 2 minutes, okay? Opening rooms now. Just checking back in. So it's absolutely fine if the problem that you chose to share was a personal problem, because design thinking, the whole idea here is for you to just see how flexible design thinking is, that it can really be used in so many different contexts and very fast. So ideally what's happened now is every group that at least one person has shared kind of a problem that they're facing that's real, and the group has had a chance to dig a little deeper, show empathy. So let's do the next step quite fast. Let me show you what that would be visually first, and then I'll put you back in the same breakout rooms. So so someone has shared the challenge, your team has asked clarifying questions. So that has helped you now define the challenge better, right? What is it exactly that the challenge is? So let's go to the brainstorming of ideas now, where brainstorming is not trying to convince people why your idea is best. It's rapidly giving as many ideas as possible, given what the problem is, right? Given what the challenge is. So Now your team is going to offer a lot of ideas, and then the prototype, what are you willing to try? That would be kind of the prototype. What's one idea that you're willing to try? So I'm going to put you back in the same groups, and you're going to now have a chance to have maybe 3 more minutes where you'll offer quick ideas to the person who shared the challenge. By the way, the person who shared the challenge, don't say good idea, bad idea, just take it in, right? This is just a brainstorm. And then when you come back, presenter, think about what's one thing you're willing to try. So this is the ideation or the brainstorming. Any questions before I put you back in the same groups for 3 minutes? Yeah, don't worry about going back in a room. Maybe we can just chat here for a minute. Firstly, do you have any questions at this point on what we've talked about?
Yes, sure. First of all, sorry, because I really want to share with the friends, especially through this topic, but unfortunately, because of the internet connections, so making me, so I'm not get some struggle here. So I think with the design thinking it's already, I also already learned the last month with the Katie as well, but not really in a specific way. We're just noticing about the 5 things that I already mentioned. And then I think what I'm really like curious about is about the emphasize, like, for example, we having like some project, right? Like in my case, I have some projects, but for example, when I go to the society or community to implementing my projects, sometimes we get the struggle because of in the situation of Timor-Leste, some of the
we're back. I think I'm practicing to be consultant.
Nice. Yeah. So
I just got to laugh like in the middle while talking, but it's cool. I got that point. So at today's meeting, it's so related to all. It's so flexible. That's true.
Yeah, that's awesome, Andra, to hear that, because this is, if you can feel at the end of this session that I can be a design thinking consultant, because all a design thinking consultant does is really recognize that once there's a challenge that has a human kind of element to it, chances is that it's a complex challenge. If I'm building a bridge, that's an engineering challenge. If I need to drive across the country, even the United States, from Florida to California, and I need to reach California in 1 week, that, even though there's a driver involved and maybe the car breaks down, that fundamentally is not a design thinking challenge. I can calculate the distance, average driving time per day, and figure out how to get there in a week. But a lot of the challenges that are human in nature, where people change their minds, where I'm trying to satisfy both physical and psychological needs, are perfect for design thinking. And this process is powerful there. Empathize with your user or users, then try to define the problem better. Give yourself space to generate a lot of possible solutions, and then apply some criteria to prototype, which is quickly build out 1 or 2 solutions, test it, and see what happens. That's it. And if you can do that for a friend, you can do that for a team. But part of the design thinking mindset is, don't think of yourself as, I'm not a design thinker, I'm still learning about it. After this session, and you've had a session with Katie, I've shared some resources in the links. The Stanford site has a lot of resources. You should think of yourself as design thinkers in what you can do. So thank you, Andrea, for quickly sharing that. So questions, comments, thoughts at this point after your group work? By the way, can design thinking solve any challenge?
I would say yes, and the things that I get from my group, as I think most of my consultant, I guess, they really work very hard to understand my questions and my challenge, as well as they dig deeper to how to solve the issues. So I think it's really mesmerizing, and I totally appreciate it.
Fantastic to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I would say there's some challenges that are very complex, and design thinking may not solve it per se, may not get you to a point where you have the answer, but it's certainly a process to help you move forward, right? And we know as human beings that solutions tend to be more like journeys than a destination, right? We're trying to make a better education system. We are trying to eradicate poverty, but frankly, if we have poverty come down, that's a big step. We would love to see climate change not to be the century's biggest threat, but if we can mitigate some of the effects of climate change, that's a step forward. So yeah, I think it can help us move forward. But I think the mindset is not around we've got a perfect solution, but we've got closer to a better solution, or we've moved forward. Yeah. I'm aware that we've hit time. So let me share 2 more slides, and then I'll open it up for 5 minutes of discussion for those of you who want to and can stay. But first, we'll take a screenshot of the picture. So 2 things. Let me just share the slides real fast. Just 2 concluding slides real fast here. So here we go. Tell me if you're seeing this. Oops. Are you seeing it now? Yeah. So
Yes.
this is, if somebody says, oh, I went through this 1.5-hour workshop on design thinking, I really don't know what it's about. Well, here's 7 words. Get curious. Designers ask for people's stories. They ask questions. They connect, right? So it's the mindset of curiosity. I'm not an expert, but I want to understand more. I may have a lot of knowledge on this problem I'm trying to solve, but I know I'm not an expert. I'm going to constantly be asking questions and be curious about the challenge. How do I learn? I talk to people. Why? Because I'm trying to solve a people problem. And then I'm going to try things, even when I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, because I'm going to learn from doing. Get curious, talk to people, try things. That's design thinking mindset in 7 words. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing the right screen. Sorry. Thanks for pointing that out. Let me do this again. Share screen. Okay. Now you see it, right? Okay. So it's those 7 words. The essence of the design thinking mindset. Get curious, talk to people, try things. And I wanted to share the quote of, this is a wonderful TED Talk from Kelly. He says, he's the founder of the design school at Stanford. He says, design thinking is the confidence that everyone can be part of creating a more desirable future, and a process, the 5 steps, to take action when faced with a difficult challenge. Do you see how it's a mindset and a skill set? The mindset is I have the confidence that I can be part of the solution. The skill set is I know there's a process to working with complex challenges. I start with empathy if I can, and then I define the problem, and then I brainstorm, and then I prototype, and I test my prototype. That's it. And that is what I would love for you to feel that you have now. So yeah, I want to thank you. Please feel free to be in touch. I'll drop my personal email into the chat box, but obviously, this is the Center for Executive Education that I'm representing. Some of you have already connected with me on LinkedIn, so thank you, and encourage you to do that. I'll also let me just drop my email into the chat box, mohit@upeace.org. And now I'll stay on for another 5 minutes if there are any comments or questions. But at this point, let's just do a screenshot. So if you can put on your camera, I'll send this to Laura so she can send to everybody. And all right, should we do some kind of design thinking Friday night sign? I don't know, like, yes. All right, so 1, 2, 3. I'll do one more screenshot here. All right. Thank you, everyone. So enjoy your Friday evening, enjoy your weekend. Feel free to drop off now. I'll stay on for another 5 minutes for anyone who has anything they'd like to chat about. So have a wonderful, wonderful EISC course. You'll be in great hands there. Thank you for connecting.
Thank you, Mohit. It's nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Andra. Appreciate it. Mutia, I see you have your hand up, so please.
Yeah. So related to your previous questions, you asked that should any problem can solve by design thinking. So it is related to my personal experience. So I have a problem to connecting the dots of my problem. So before I want to make the executions for my problem, I've already like interview, I elaborate the result, I focus how to solve it. But my problem is I don't know actually how to start to connecting the dots. So sometimes in some of problems I cannot get best solutions. So the executions get gone wrong. So how do you know that what is the best way to connect the dots after we already get the solver about the problem? Thank you, Mohit.
So Mutia, so sorry, I am going to have to say that if you gave me specifics, I could respond to your specific situation. But in general terms, connecting the dots becomes philosophical. It's a little bit, let's say if I'm trying to let's say I have a 16-year-old daughter and I'm trying to make sure that she has all the resources to be successful in high school, and then I look at how she's doing and all the things I've done, and I can connect the dots to all the things that I've done and her results. And so there are many ways to connect the dots looking backwards, right? And sometimes you can say, oh, I've done everything possible. Look, the dots connect so well. Or sometimes the same data, you can say, oh, I should have done this better. This didn't. So connecting the dots there's a lot of interpretation also. So if you want to schedule a different time to specifically tell me your situation, I could help you read that data and connect the dots and maybe offer a different perspective. But there's always an interpretation to connecting the dots, right? So that's sorry. So my answer is a little bit vague, given that I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, so to maybe to make it easier, so like this, for example, I have a problem and I already know how to solve it,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to start the executions actually. Like, oh, I know how to start it. Okay, I will do this, and I know what is the ending. But yeah, my problem is still I don't know how to start. That's the basic problem actually. So sometimes sometimes it is go back again to my questions like how to connect these thoughts. Like I know the problem, I know the solving, but I don't know how to start it. Like yeah, the executions. It is the basic problem.
So and maybe there's something different there. Again, not knowing the context, there is, so I used to teach physics for a year. There's something called inertia. Yeah, and inertia applies to objects. Something at rest wants to stay at rest, but it also applies to human behavior. If I'm not doing something, it's very hard to start doing it, right? There's an activation energy required. So there's many tricks to starting something. So let's say if I know the solution to becoming more fit is exercising 15 minutes a day, not hard. How do I activate that behavior given that I don't exercise? One way is to buy a pair of running shoes and leave it right next to my bedside. So I wake up and it's the first thing I see, but maybe I ignore it. So then I tell my 3 best friends, I'm going to go running tomorrow. And if I don't, call me a loser, right? Or I could take it a step further. If I don't, I'm going to write you a $50 check. Because, so you can trick yourself through both incentives. Like if I do run, I'm going to go and celebrate by, I don't know, however you celebrate, buying my favorite bar of chocolate, which may counter effect the running. So maybe that's not a good one. But so so human behavior and how to activate, how to start some things, there's many good techniques on it. So again, without knowing the specifics, I can't coach you on that, but I definitely know the challenge of starting something that's new.
Yeah, I actually got the point. It's about finding the trigger, right?
Yeah. And
the
almost
basic.
making it harder for you not to do the new thing than to do the new thing. All right.
Right.
Yeah. And
Thank you so much.
think about that. Yeah. They call it activation energy. And if for me to exercise means I have to get into the car, drive to a gym, and then rush back in time and shower before my next meeting, that's not a good setup, right? That's too hard. Then I'll find 5 reasons why I won't do it. Yeah.
Right.
So
Thank you so
minimize
much.
that. Most welcome. Most welcome. Jennifer, you have your hand up. Yeah.
Yes. So now I am working in the advertising industry, and also we also apply this kind of design thinking process in our brainstorming stuff. So we always start with emphasize that we define the target audiences, and then we empathize with them, and then have to understand what their problems are. We try to define the problems, yes, but the thing that make us like stuck, I mean, cannot bring the good solution is from define the problem with to ideation. I mean, the possible solution. We have to cross the bridge that called find the insight. The insights here, the underlying truth, the truth that everybody see and understand, but nobody say out loud. So we're always stuck there. We cannot find the insight. So how to define? How do you know you are define the right problems, and how to process the insight? For example, right now I have like some specific situation here. So I used to teach English for adults, the one who working, and then okay, so I kind of understand why they are busy. They don't want to work. They don't want to study after a long working day, and also because they are old. They're getting old, so it's hard for them to change their pronunciation and stuff. So I understand their problems. So, and I also can define the problems. But when it comes to giving them the possible solutions, it's still hard for me to give them the solutions. Maybe because I cannot find the insights here. So that is like one of the example that I really need.
Yeah, so I'll respond fairly quickly because I will need to transition soon. But Jennifer, so what you described, for example, in that situation, it could be a gravity problem. So to change somebody's pronunciation at an advanced age in life over Zoom when they're not, it's something that may not happen, right? But what could happen certainly is their confidence in speaking English goes up. Their confidence to read and understand English goes up, or whatever language you're teaching. So what sometimes the insight might be, what am I trying to maximize, right? But if so, and the enjoyment of the lesson can go up. So if you say, okay, these are the things I can influence. I can influence their level of comprehension. I can influence their confidence in the language. I can influence the fact that they're enjoying the lesson and learning. I can't influence their pronunciation, and maybe that's not so important. So once you've redefined the challenge, then you can make things a lesson plan that gives them more confidence, that gives them, certain skills. So the insight, my insight from the outside might be, pick a challenge that's meaningful. You're trying to get them better at a language. Pick a challenge that's meaningful to them that you can act on. That's what I would say. And so it might be a little bit redefining what is it that you're trying to do. If somebody comes to me as a social entrepreneur and says, Mohit, I want my social enterprise to be successful, as in have impact, and I want to be a millionaire, I might say, let's talk about what do you really want? You want to make impact in your social enterprise. That's great. You want to be a millionaire, but that may be unrealistic. But do you want to not be worrying at night about money? Oh yeah, I want to not. So I redefine. It's not that you want $1 million. You just don't want to be starving. You don't want to be worrying about it. Now I can work with you on that. What's your budget? Oh, you're spending $30,000 a year. So if you make 35, then you're a millionaire. You're not worrying about finances. So again, same with language. You may not help them with perfect pronunciation, but you could help them with confidence. You could help them in situations navigate a foreign language.
Okay, so like when I define the problem, try to find the core reason, the main problems, and then give the possible solution that I can help them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And again, because so much of communication is at a confidence level, if these old people wanted to do 50 push-ups or 50 chin-ups, that's something measurable. That's not a confidence thing. Either you can do 50 chin-ups or you can't. And you might decide, Mohit, I can never help them do 50 chin-ups. And I would say you're absolutely right. You might not, but you can help them get fit. So it's like that. Redefine the problem so that you can help them get to the solution. But if they want to do 50 chin-ups and they're 75 and they've never done more than 5 chin-ups in their life, that's not a good problem for you to try to solve. If they want perfect pronunciation, that's not a good problem for you to try and solve. But if they want confidence, yes. If they want to get fit, yes. Yeah, if you were a personal trainer. So yeah, redefine the problem in a way that it's acceptable to them, acceptable to you, and you can act on it.
Okay, I kind of understand what you mean. Thank you.
Most welcome. Oh, Ni, you're muted. Okay, good. So I'm going to need to cut out. I've really enjoyed my time with you and wishing you all the best in the rest of the program. So thank you for staying on a little longer and have a great Friday night and weekend. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Likewise.
Thank you.